Recording in progress. Okay. So we've got yeah, this is exciting because this is the first ever episode of whatever this is. This is our podcast on the channel, the Historian Stash. We don't even have a name for this podcast yet. We just yeah, Taps, I'm gonna also just throw it out to the viewers to also try and come up with one, like see if they're keen for naming us. Otherwise, you and I and who else just have to we just gotta lock our heads together and just come up with a name.
Okay,
Um,
no, that's cool.
but yeah, it's my absolute pleasure to have on this first ever podcast with
Yeah,
myself, Dr. Jacobus Seynert. I've got Dr.
yeah,
Thapelo Mokoatsi. Yeah,
yes.
this guy is really accomplished for a guy as young as he is, or like how old are you? Or like 103. So yeah, and you've got
115, 115.
right. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, so young in historical terms. Um, and I've known him for close to a decade. We've we've
yeah,
cut our teeth in the history department at Rhodes in Grahamstown.
yeah.
And now we're cutting our teeth together at the University of Fort Hare as lecturers. And it's really, really cool to have someone like him on your side and
Yeah.
really interesting. So I am going to pass the mic, so to speak, going to pass it on to you, Taps, that you can just tell us a little bit, but like where you firstly where you grew up, your background, where you come from, and how did you get interested in history, man?
Sure. That's a very tricky question for me because I also don't know how I found myself in this space as an historian. But for as long as I can remember, I think it has always been, I think for me, it's a question of history found me rather than I found history. Because I remember in primary, I got 100% for history exam
Yo,
twice
yo,
in uh, grade 4, grade 6, or something like that.
jeez.
So I remember my history teacher would use two huge, in fact, four huge blackboard. She would write all the notes with the chalk on the blackboard in two different classes, and they continue. And then she had a very tiny handwriting, and then she would fill up the entire block. You know,
Eesh.
that green blackboard,
Yeah, yeah.
entire block with all the history that was prescribed for us to learn at that time. And it overlapped for the next class. And I would write all of that, keep track of everything. And at that time, I wasn't doing a lot of reading. I don't remember sitting at home, focusing engrossed in the words or in the book, reading.
Hmm.
But I remember learning as I go and having a very sharp memory. I guess it boiled down to the teaching methodology that
Hmm.
was employed
Hmm.
at that time. Or maybe my mind worked like a sponge. I was young, I was in primary. So the moment I write down everything, I read by my pen,
Yeah,
I write what I see on the blackboard and I write it down on my
right.
notepad, and I read, I think, I memorize as I go.
Hmm.
When I get home, just like any kid, I want to be playful. And the next day or a few days later, you're writing a test or writing an exam and you get full marks. And the same applies with all other subjects. I always say that was the only time I enjoyed schooling. Out of
Hmm.
from primary to Rhodes to here, the best time of my life as a scholar were only in the first 7 years of my life as a scholar or
Right.
as a learner.
So
Yeah.
your
So I was
primary
born,
school.
my primary school was my best years ever
Mm.
because I got to be taught as how I think.
Mm.
It's almost as if they knew how my mind works. It's almost as if the whole thing was designed for me
Mm.
because the way they taught it was such that they understand how your mind works and they taught you accordingly. Things got a little bit complicated when I got to high school, and then and in high school I still got 100% for history
Yeah.
as well in grade 8. It was then called social science, but I
Ah.
remember it incorporated a bit of anthropology because you learn about the Homo sapiens, Homo erectus, the Sterkfontein uh, uh, cave, and things like that. And I remember my history teacher, he not want to give me 100%. He's like, no, no, I'm not going to give you 100%. I'm going to give you 98% because no students get 100% in my
What the
class.
hell?
And I'm like, but we both know that I got 100%.
Yeah.
And then he focused a lot of his attention on me from that moment on. And then he's like, you know, in 2 years' time, so I was in grade 8. So my grade 8 was 2003. So grade 9, 10, when you get to grade 10, you're going to do history, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
And then I said to him, hell no, I'm not going to do history. Remember the year before, 2002, Mark Shuttleworth went on space and we are all excited.
Yeah.
Now everyone wants to be a scientist,
Yeah.
everyone wants to be in
The entire
space.
South Africa
And here
wanted to be scientists, and everyone's like, "Woo,
yeah,
science!"
yeah. So nobody said, hang on, Taps, hang on, hang on, hang on. Yes, we're gonna go to space, but you can go to space as a historian. You don't need to be a scientist to go to space.
Yeah.
And also, I felt, and not I'm not throwing shade at anyone, but I felt social science teachers' work ethic was not did not align with my work ethic. So the only people who were attractive, who looked like they are working very hard, were the history, I mean the social science, natural science stream.
Mm.
So I got to grade 10. I then went natural science route. So I did not choose history.
Sure.
So I left history at that. And then August 2007, when I was in matric, if I'm not mistaken, that was deep in my matric examination, final matric examination. It then hit me. I should have done history
Hey, bo.
because I love it.
Yo.
And in grade 11, in grade 10, whenever we had Human Rights Day, I'll be going to the school management to ask them to stand in front of everyone at the assembly and tell them the significance of Human Rights Day, the significance of 9 August, Women's
Yeah.
Day,
Almost there.
the significance of 16, and so on and so forth. And mind you, when that happened, I thought, okay, I need to apply I need to think about what I want to do after matric. So I applied um, to UFS and applied for BSc microbiology and human biology.
Jeez, suck it. Taps.
And then this was before the epiphany. So after the epiphany, I applied to Stellenbosch University,
Yeah.
politics, philosophy, and economics. So
Wow.
somehow fate had it. I'm not gonna go to Stellenbosch University. I'm gonna go to COFC and become a COFC UFS student. I remember on the 3rd of Jan 2008, I was in Bloemfontein, went to the university administration. I told them I want to enroll for BA.
Yeah.
Scrap that BSc human biology, microbiology thing, scrap it out. Because I already got preliminary acceptance letter at that time that
Wow.
says, hey, here's a student number. We're waiting for your final results. Because I applied with my grade 11 results, November grade 11 results. So we're waiting for your final matric results. Then you can enroll for BSc human biology and microbiology. And I said, no, not going to do that. Then I enrolled for BA. And this time it was not, still was not BA
Mm.
history or something
Mm.
like that. Well, UFS did not necessarily have BA history, but you would do BA, maybe political science, and then
Yeah.
you major in history, or BA general. So I found myself in a BA extended program because I started to feel I was not cut out to do science, natural science subjects.
Yeah.
So I just passed my matric literally. And I remember I was like, no, this is not how I wanted to pass. I should have done history. Then that way, because I love it, I would have gotten way better marks. I
Wow.
wanted to be in the top 200 in the Free State. That
Mm.
yearly thing where you are in the top 200,
Mm. Mm.
blah, blah. I thought it would end like that, but it never ended like that because I did not choose history. I don't know
Sure.
if the history will haunt me, but
Sure.
but I literally got your minimum university entry. And I remember one of my teachers who was teaching me biology. I did not do a life science, I did biology. He said, listen, man, bottom line is your matric certificate says you qualify to go to university.
Mm.
It does not get any better than that.
No, no. The end
It's
the,
not.
the end result is the fact that you've got entry into university.
You see what I mean? But
The
still,
how you got there, it doesn't matter. The fact that but yeah, I
yes.
mean still in the back
You
of
see,
your head you think, oh, that was
yeah. So,
close.
yeah, so now, yeah, so now I get to I get to enroll for BA for a program. It was called extended program because I needed to bridge now.
Right.
Because yes, I did qualify, but I still needed to do developmental modules in order to meet further requirements of being
Right.
a fully fledged BA student. Still, I found myself uh, majoring in political science and communication science. And again, history was my minor.
Hmm.
I remember I was I was on the verge of finishing my junior degree, my BA, and history was clashing with communication
Ooh,
science. So I had three majors:
ooh,
communication science, political science, and history.
history. Yeah.
So I have to decide whether I want to check which out of the three, which one must I, which one
Mm.
I needed to deregister. So I deregistered history.
Hmm.
So I stuck with communication science.
Ah,
And political science. No,
look
no,
at
we'll
you
get there. We'll get
betraying look at you betraying the order very early on in your life.
measured. So
Yeah.
now, and mind you, in my first year, I did well, still got distinctions. When you look at my academic record, that's how much I struggled for someone who came from underprivileged background.
Mm.
I literally struggled a lot to understand, when you read for comprehension, when
Mm.
you need to have some of your understanding has to be a little bit broader.
Yeah.
Sometimes from township schools don't do that well because they are incompetent. They don't do that well
Mm.
because English to them is a second language. So I also
Exactly.
needed to come to terms with the fact that this is now my language
Yeah.
of instruction, and I will need to perfect it as much as I can. So doing developmental modules like academic language course, which is basically English, business English, basic English, linguistics, literature, all of this combined. So it was not English on one. It was a combination of English modules here and there put together.
Mm.
So I had to do that. So most of my distinctions then came from history.
Hmm.
Again, the universe is showing me this is where you belong. Because
Yeah.
if there's any module you are killing, you are doing so well in, it's history.
Yeah.
But at that time, I remember I wanted to, I knew there were three things for me. Either I'm going to be a South African ambassador somewhere in the world, or I'm going to be an academic, I'm going to be a political analyst.
Mm.
Those are the three things that I knew I would fall under as far as my trajectory is concerned. So that's why I was focused more on political studies because I was told if you want to go through this stream, if you want to make it as a political scientist, what have you, you need to do political science. So nobody made me see the beauty of doing history. I guess I had to figure that out myself.
Yeah.
But I'll get to that. So so now I I had to I'm losing my train of thought now. I talk too much. But I had to, okay, I had to I had to undergo
You
all
actually,
the all,
you actually went and interrupted yourself, and then you lost your train of thought because of yourself. This is like, for those who don't know, this is typical, not just taps, but this is typical historians. We actually have the knack of interrupting ourselves and then losing our train of thought, and then wondering how did we get to this point? Uh,
yeah.
uh
And
yeah.
and I want to get to the I haven't gotten to the
Oh,
point.
yeah. Oh,
I
you
just
haven't
want
gone to
to
yeah.
no, I haven't gotten to the point. I want to take you back and back and back and back, then get
Oh,
to the point. But
okay.
anyway, what the long and short of what I'm trying to say is that I still haven't seen history as a huge part of my life. But in hindsight, they say hindsight is the best science. So
Right.
in hindsight, I could see that it has been following me. Whether I was following it or not, it has been following me. It's like running away from being an historian instead of running towards being an historian.
Yeah.
So I was not running towards. I was running away from being an historian,
Mm.
but it caught up with me ultimately. So I just wanted to narrate how it caught up with me. But one of my best moments as I was an undergrad doing history as one of my minors, I then met Dr. Kumpi.
Mm.
Then was Mr. Kumpi. And I also met Mr. Twala, who's now Professor Twala, now Dr. Kumpi. So he also helped me see how much I can make it as an historian.
Mm.
When in one of the classes, he picked me up. So he instructed us to have a group discussion, and then he picked. I don't know if I picked myself or somebody picked me, or I don't remember what actually happened, but I was representing my group. I was the speaker. So every group was given a task, and then you each have to present your findings. So he gave us a task in class. And then I spoke very well, I explained historical concept very well, historical things very well. And then from that, I became, well, not necessarily a history tutor, but because UFS at that time, not necessarily having history tutors as such. They had something like student assistant.
Mm.
So that's how he picked, he was like, there's potential here. Who are you? Where are you from? What's your story? I'm like, oh, so and so, blah, blah, blah. And and it so happened that I continue to do well in this module, and that's how our relationship started. And on the other hand, I did the same thing in political science class, international relations class, and still, then for the first time, I was given a job of becoming a tutor, political science tutor for the module international relations. Yeah, that was international relations. But throughout my undergrad, because I did politics one, two, and three, so UFS broke it down into political dynamics and international relations. So I did both, but I knew that, in fact, I did international relations because I thought I'm going to be an ambassador, a diplomat. So I thought, let me only for IR.
Mm.
So I did international relations, but one thing that kept on boggling my mind was how even in all these modules, even in the textbooks, even the lecturers, they were not saying anything positive about Africa.
Mm.
I didn't understand how come. And they were always talking about Africa as very passive in the global political economy.
Yeah.
and Africa is the recipient, Africa is the beggar, and
Yes.
first
Yeah.
world countries are tired of supporting Africa. Africa must figure out what it wants to do. They're not giving us the historical context of why are we here? Why are things the way they are? So that's why in my final year, I thought because I'm not gonna do history as my honors, because I only have history one and history two. I don't have history three. That was
Mm.
not allowed. So I then applied to do honors in political studies, particularly in international relations. And then on other hand, I applied at the Center for Africa Studies to do my honors
Ooh.
in Africa Studies. Because I realized I felt and I was in two minds about where do I go? Do I do honors in Africa Studies? Do I do honors in international relations? What
Mm.
do I do with this?
Yeah.
Up until I was watching news and then Thabo Mbeki spoke about this African
Yeah.
Renaissance
I'm an
and
African.
yeah, the new partnership for Africa's development. He says
Yeah.
something profound. I don't remember exactly what he said. Then it hit me again. I had another epiphany. Then I decided rather, no, I'm going to do my honors in Africa studies. And then when I got to that level, I started to learn about how uh, now I can use historical context to argue my points out in political science. And my strength has always been I bring a lot of historical context
Mm.
to make us understand. But for example, my honors was on Equatorial Guinea,
Oh.
and yeah, I was asking. The main question, research question was: is the political stability in Equatorial Guinea post independence,
Mm.
and what does that mean? And so you were required to only focus on what is going on in Equatorial Guinea. That's
Mm.
enough. But then I brought the colonial and the pre-colonial history to understand the politics of Equatorial Guinea. Then to answer the question, do I think they rather are free in terms of time? Is it temporal? Is the independence temporal or is it
Mm.
political?
Mm.
Yeah. So that's how history started to creep into my life
Wow.
slowly. And then when I got to master's level, again, the same thing happened. Then I focused on Guinea and Guinea-Bissau. Then I found myself writing about three Guineas: Equatorial Guinea, former Spanish colony, and then Guinea-Bissau, former Portuguese colony, and Guinea, former French colony. And here I am, 2015, finishing my master's, and now I need to decide what's next. And then I found myself working with Zubeida Jaffa. Um, she was writing a biography of Charlotte Maxeke. So she needed student assistance, and luckily I was there as a research assistant. So she asked me to talk to FWD Clark Foundation. And I spoke to, I keep forgetting his name, but he was South African ambassador and under the cleric's presidency. I've
Uh,
forgotten which country.
mm.
Yeah, but then he was the chairperson of W. Clark Foundation between around 2014 to 2015. I forgot his name, but it's somewhere in my emails. I forgot the
Mm.
name. And then the next person I needed to talk to was Professor Julia Wells.
Mm.
Zueda just said, talk to Professor Julia Wells, ask her if she can confirm whether Charlotte McCracky was part of the anti-pass campaign in 1912.
Wow.
And then I wrote to Professor Wells and I told her, I'm so and so. I'm sent by so and so to investigate on this and that. Is it possible to back up our claim? Then that's where the interest started. Where are you? What are you doing? Who are you? And at that time, I already inquired at UCT. I want if I can do my PhD with them.
Mm.
So I was scared of going overseas. I felt okay. I had enough Africana culture, history, everything Africana was. So I needed to clear myself of that
Mm.
by going to the former British colony and then and then go abroad. That was like the thinking. I was sort of had this whole tracker mentality,
Right.
the great drag. Instead
Yeah.
of going, they go to the west of the Cape. Instead of going up, they went east of the Cape. Then they went into the interior. So I
Yeah.
was doing the process. I'm in Bloemfontein. I'm at the center. I was going to the west. From
Yeah.
the west, get on the ship back to Europe. So
Reverse osmosis.
yeah, I was doing something of that nature. So, so, and then she was like, no, man, I want you to do history, PhD history with me. And are you available? Are you interested? And that was the time, this is 2015. That was the time when she was writing on, she was writing a report on UN development program
Mm.
about, and I think you're supposed to be part of it.
Mm.
Me and Craig were part of it, and you were doing your masters. You were wrapping
Yeah.
up your masters as
We
well,
yeah,
so
well
you
we
couldn't
were
be part
doing
of that.
yeah.
Yeah, we're like, this Yaku person is missing out. Who's that Yaku? Damn
Ah,
him.
I man.
And I traveled. I was still in Bloom at that time. I traveled all the way
So you knew
to
about
Makani.
me and Craig doing doing that thing on the UN. The
Yeah, yeah. So she invited me over in 2015 because we've been talking a lot via email. So she was like, "No, man, I need to see you. Who are you?"
ah.
And at that time, I already had body of work for a publication called The Journalist. So that also helped to say, we need to meet up. Then I moved to I traveled to Makanda. I spent the week there at Corey doing the research. And then the idea of doing PhD in history intensified. And then we started to put it in motion.
Mm.
So I was like, but I don't have a master's in history. I don't have 30-year history. And
Mm.
then she said, no, 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 that's not. You have a master's in African studies. That's an interdisciplinary studies. You did political science, you did philosophy, you did history, you did methodology, you did agricultural science. So you did all of these things. Well, like agricultural economy, I think. So all of these things put together, they make you understand African history much better. So you are coming on board. Then I forgot about UCT. Then I enrolled for a PhD in history. So that's how I became an historian.
Wow. Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Taps
Did
it.
I answer all your questions?
Yeah, well, we're running out of time for that for the 40 minute this bloody Zoom 40-minute thing.
Yes, been
Uh,
watching this. Did I
Hey?
speak that long? Did I
Yeah,
spend 40 minutes talking, answering one question?
you essentially yeah, that's one question you spent 30 minutes talking. Yeah.
Oh,
But that's historians for you. But yeah, this Zoom, yo, with their 40-minute thing, but I mean we are cheap right now because we can't afford to upgrade. I
you
need
can afford to,
But that's why I need like this
yeah,
YouTube. I need freaking YouTube subscribers. We need hours. We need people
yeah, yeah.
interested in this. But let's adjourn for now for like 2 minutes, and then what we can do is, well, I'm going to ask you just other questions too. But I've got some comments to make on what you said because I really
Okay.
think it actually is a um, great way to interject this now because I would like to follow up on what you said. So your timing was perfect, actually. She said so.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
A few moments later.
Recording in progress again. Okay, Taps. Buddy,
Yes.
thanks, man. Thanks for just like sharing that story. And I think while you were talking about that, I was thinking about um how many students are going through exactly the same conflicts, exactly the same like debates within themselves on, is history a viable profession or a viable future? I mean, I had exactly that same kind of doubts in my mind and questions when I was doing it. And as you know, my story is relatively similar to yours. I mean, we went through um, kind of like opposite strands to reach that point, but our stories are quite similar in the fact that history didn't start out as being a viable profession for us. It was always a passion of ours, but it was never really considered to be a posi like a one that we are going to pursue for the rest of our lives and to enter into academia
Yeah.
because let's face it, the recruitment isn't really that strong when it comes to academic positions and professions. And so when you are in that position of, you're a young scholar and you are unsure of what to choose, and also at school, when you're a school pupil, you kind of like, there's the cookie cutter aspect of school, which kind of forces you into a certain direction, nudges you into
Mm.
directions of, if you want to become successful, these are the certain paths that you need to follow.
Yeah.
Science being the big one, maths being the other big one. These are the paths that need to be followed, and kind of like the other subjects are on the fringes. They are perceived to be lovely and helpful, but kind of like the party trick of of
Yeah.
school subjects, like yeah, and that's why I don't know if you've had that experience, but a lot of people say, "Oh, you're an historian. What do you do?" Whereas,
Yes.
you know, whereas with a lawyer or a doctor, do people ask that at all? Do they,
They don't.
they don't.
Funny should funny should say that where I stay now, one of the um, personnel who looks after the place says to me, "Oh, I've met someone here who says they're from UJ," and then I told them that you're at UJ, and then I said, "Oh, okay. Is that is that person an historian?" I thought of Lady Gourds
Ah,
because the 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 caretaker said, "Well, that person says they know you." I said, "Oh, okay, it must be Lady Gourds." And then only to find out, no, that's not Lindy. And then late the following day, I went to see him and I said, "Oh, so do you have any further information about that person who might know me?" And then he said, "No, actually, I don't think you guys know each other." And I told them that you are an historian. And then they asked me, out of all the things, why an historian?
it's
And that
crazy.
was a bit, yeah, it left me thinking, what kind of question is that?
Hmm. Well,
So yeah,
the thing is that the question comes from a sincere place, I think. Well, I know because
yeah,
people genuinely don't know what historians really do. I mean, they've got certain
yeah.
ideas in their mind, but and also certain um preconceived things that are either in the media or that they've read about somewhere else or have read about in romance novels. Hopefully, I mean, I hope historians are represented in romance novels. I mean, I would love a
Oh, they
character,
are.
right? I would
Yeah,
love a character to be based on me, don't you think? Just not an antagonist,
yeah.
but like
Why
a
not? Why not?
strapping Afrikaner coming out of the smoke. And he's an historian, by the way. Pretty cool. I
You
like
know, you
that.
know what I was thinking about how you're missing out as an Afrikaner.
Missing
You
out.
you supposed Yeah, you're missing out. Remember, I spoke about the Laager effect. You're missing out
The Laager effect.
because
Please tell
you are
me.
nothing.
Please tell me how
The
I'm
thing
missing out,
is,
Taps.
in my head, you're supposed to be a bull, not even
Uh-huh.
an Afrikaner, and you're
Uh-huh.
supposed to have a farm in Hoopstad, and you're supposed to
That's weirdly
ignore
specific, but
everything.
okay.
Yeah, there's a reason I'm
Whoopstad, yeah.
specifically thinking about this town
Okay.
because you're supposed to be in a place where it's you inside the Laager effect,
Right.
and it's you and General Cours de la Rey.
Yeah.
You know the song De La Rey?
Yeah.
And it's
Love that song.
you justifying why only you deserve to be here. So you're missing out.
So what you're saying is that I should return to my lager and then basically I
And
should
become a rectable, you know the
I should
rectable.
establish myself on a farm and
Yes,
chickens, like a couple of chickens clucking around, and then we've got cows
yes.
mooing around, and I've
Yeah,
got my horse, and then and then I've got to have my wife, my vrouw as well, there making
yes.
coffee for me. I mean, it's a
Yeah,
nice
yeah,
life,
yeah.
isn't it?
Dude, it
Sounds
is nice
ideal.
life. So
Hmm.
you'd be seen as someone who betrayed the struggle. You are like the unsmarts.
I'm the
You have the
outlier.
unsmart complex. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
have the
Yeah.
unsmart
Jan
complex now.
Smuts, definitely,
Yeah.
bro. Yeah. Did I tell you about
And
Jan
you know what
Smuts?
is
Did I tell you about
hmm?
my family's connection to Jan Smuts? Just by the by.
Yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah.
this
I
would
think it's,
explain a lot. This would explain a lot about what you're saying about
you see what
the
I mean?
the Lager effect. Because
Yeah,
Jan Smuts, and
yeah.
this is pretty interesting because Jan Smuts is actually indirectly family of ours.
Mhm.
Our Jan Smuts' wife, Icy, was actually a scabbard, which is my grandmother's on my dad's side's family. And so
Wow.
she is like my great aunt. Were there enough
Oh,
greats in there? Or two? But anyways, long story. But yeah, so that explains a lot about the whole lager effect that I should actually be. This is where
yeah.
I belong. This is where I belong. I'm in the
Yeah,
outlier
yeah, yeah.
community because of Tanya Icy Smuts. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So your ancestors are supposed to be punishing you now for not wanting to be rectable.
punishing me. Jeez, Taps. That went a bit far. Goodness.
You're supposed to have this dark cloud hovering over you
Well,
because
it
you have
could be
betrayed.
the Slachter's Neck crowd who are punishing me now because those guys
Yeah,
were the real deal boors. They were the guys who
yeah,
defied all authority, who were slave
yeah,
owners, who weren't
yes,
too happy about the whole thing of, you know, black and white living together, English and Afrikaner living together, and
yeah,
they wanted
yeah,
to bugger off and
yeah.
and started a
So
little rebellion, not to
yeah. So you
settle.
asked me where one of the questions you asked was where I was born. So
Hmm.
and in one of the Amatole seminars, when I was listening to one of the speakers, I was listening to, I think Lerato
Hmm.
Mokoena, with her book,
Yeah, with
what's
Orania. Yo, we need to get her on this
Orania.
podcast, eh? We need to get her on here.
Yes, yes, yes. She's amazing.
Yeah.
So I started to think, but actually, my whole life I lived outside the ladder effect, and you know what is interesting about all of that is growing up in a very small. I usually describe it as a small cattle and farming town.
Hmm.
That's how I usually describe it. Because that's what it is. It's a
Hmm.
small town literally surrounded by farms.
It's Whoopstat,
So
eh?
if the yeah, so if the farm owners wants to attack everyone, they will engulf everyone so easily from all angles because at the heart of the town of their farms is the
Is
entire
the
town.
so they surrounded.
Outside the town are
Yeah.
farms. So you see
They
how
they
easy that could
they basically adopted Ushaka's battle strategy of bullhorns, and now they've completely enveloped the town
but they
permanently.
call it but they call it the Laager effect
Right.
because
That's a lager too.
when you're yeah, so you're inside as an Afrikaner,
Yeah.
it's difficult to get out. So you're
Yeah.
not supposed to get out of the Afrikaner culture. You must be an Afrikaner woman. Everything about you must be Afrikaner.
Yeah.
Afrikaner ethics. You must understand Afrikaner history, where the people come from, why we're the Voortrekker Museum, all of those things. Why we
But you have
have
to pay homage every year to the Voortrekker Museum. You've got to go.
yes, you
Almost
have
like
to,
a pilgrimage.
yes, and
Got to
then
wear your mandatory two-tone shirt. Got to do it.
you
Yeah.
see,
Yeah.
and when you're not an Afrikaner, it's difficult to get in.
So I wanted to ask now the thing is like
Yeah.
you were born in the lager basically. You grew up in
Yes.
the lager. So how is it for a black for a black child to grow up actually within the lager? I mean, just before you answer this, I've got this vision in my head. Um, there's a painting that was painted, I think, in commemoration with the 100 years anniversary of the Great Trek, actually of the Battle of Blood River. And in that
Mm,
painting, there are various uh, African women and men who actually are helping the depiction shows how these black African men are helping to load the voorlaaiers, the muskets, to hand it
mm,
over to the men who to the Boers who are getting ready to shoot the Zulu warriors, and the whole brave Boers who are standing up, and the bravado around that. But I'm just thinking like how how is it to be one of those black people who are
mm,
within the lager. Um,
mm.
yeah, can you answer
Yeah.
that?
You are born in the lager,
Mm,
but you're an outsider. You're an insider outsider. You're in, but you're outside at the
right,
same time.
right.
So I I saw myself growing up right outside the lager. Because now it means I'm not the first generation, right? I'm
No.
like the fifth. So as time rolls by, it's like time kicks you out of the lager.
Hmm,
Like generation by generation, it kicks you out further and further and further away from the lager. So I grew up
hmm,
watching, understanding, seeing how it's like to be an Afrikaner to
hmm.
a point that my whole worldview was shaped by that.
Wow.
I've never seen black farm owners before.
Hmm,
I've never seen whatever wealth Afrikaners from my hometown enjoyed. I've never seen any black person enjoying that
hmm.
before. So success, wealth was not something tangible for me. It was something I grew up thinking only certain people deserves it because I've
Wow.
never seen any other black person enjoying the same level of success. Well, there are pockets, small pockets of black people here and there who were doing relatively well, but it was a thing because majority were not doing that well. So you only had like five families throughout apartheid, throughout my childhood who were doing relatively well, but whereas majority were not doing that well. And then you have an entire uh, show that the Afrikaners was pulling in front of us. And me watching how they live their life, I started to think, but guys, we should be having a conversation here because we are similar. There's something about us. We have shared history in a way. Because you look at the Anglo-Boer War, you look the first one, the second one, you look at all the sufferings.
Hmm,
We all suffered the same way.
hmm.
But there's that no, we need you and I cannot both be parents. One of you has to be a child.
Sure.
So those black women and men who were inside the Laager on that image that you're painting, I come from that lineage. Well, not directly, but you
Right.
know what I mean.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So,
It's it,
so,
it's
so
almost like conscientiously you're part of that um you're part of that lineage, that you've been placed
yeah,
into it by circumstance.
you see what I mean.
Mm,
And what is so interesting is that once this whole world started to unfold before me, I happened to move to UFS.
mm,
When I get to UFS, now you see how it is presented itself as a stronghold of
mm,
Afrikaner culture and history and what have you. And I remember I never had a, a black, all my professors were white and Afrikaner, mostly male.
right.
I don't remember a female, or there was one female professor, but majority were white. So that also intensified the perception that where I don't see black scholars.
Mm,
I don't see where we are going with this
mm,
because I don't see someone like myself. It only happened when I got to Rhodes and I interacted with black scholars.
mm,
I thought, oh, okay, that's very interesting. But we never had uh, a professor who's black at UFS. So that intensified the perception, the misperception, and what have you for me. And but the downside of it is through some of my experiences as an observer, because when you're outside the lager, you are forever an observer.
yeah.
Your parents don't have a voice. Your great grandparents don't have a voice. You are a child.
Mm,
They were treated as children.
yeah.
So you are the child of the child. You are the child of the children.
Mm,
So nobody sees you per se. But that alone gave you the advantage of observing what is going on. So one instance in one of my classes at UFS, there were these two white girls. I think this one had one had a blonde hair, the other has black hair. The one who has a black hair, I think she had an Italian surname or something like that. Remember that what you can call um, the buffering, where you had immigrants from Eastern Europe with your
yes.
Dutch, and then you have your German, you had your Italian, you had your Greek surnames, and coming to South Africa to
Yeah,
become
Lithuanians
Afrikaner.
were also coming.
Yes, Lithuanians, what have you. So
Mm,
it is that culture where, because it used to be very fascinating, but you are the Priya, but you're Afrikaner. Okay.
mm,
You are Kamara. Is that not
mm,
a Portuguese name? So things like that. You have a certain hold. You're
mm,
Dutch. You
mm.
see, things like that. So one time they were fighting in class. They were having this subtle fight. Trevor Noah paints a beautiful picture on how white people fight in public. They don't make you see that they fight.
No, it's
So they're
very passive aggressive.
you see what I mean? So
Yeah.
it was as such, and I don't know what they're fighting about, but ultimately what I heard was they don't like the girl with the black hair because she's not part of the Laager effect. She's not Afrikaner.
Yeah, she's an outsider.
She's English. She's an outsider. So it was interesting to see how even among the Afrikaner community, there's that.
Yeah. But
Even the I don't know if it's the Jews were also made to feel like that after Dimitri Zafenda stabbed Dr. Verwoerd.
even
And
before that,
then
even before that, man.
even before that, you
Yeah, look,
see,
the thing is, that's why there were also so many Jews who affiliated themselves with the struggle. Is because that there was, well, this is just my take on it,
yeah,
from
yeah,
what I could read, the Volpes and these guys getting involved because of the fact that they were these outliers. They grew up in relatively comfortable sheltered lives. They grew
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
in middle class, lower middle class maybe, but sometimes also upper middle class homes. But they saw a defect in this system which they are getting privilege from, which they are starting to get
Yeah.
some kind of something out of the system, and they saw that
Yeah.
and kind of like couldn't reconcile it with their beliefs, whereas those Afrikaners who were inside the Laager, as you call it, um
Mhm.
they couldn't see the wood for the trees because of the fact
Yeah. Yeah.
that because they themselves had come out of a struggle only 40 years prior and they were
Yeah.
still going through it. Now, I mean, I'm not
Mm.
condoning anything, and now
No, no, I get you. I
when
get
people
you.
see an Afrikaner saying things like this, hey,
No, no,
yeah,
no, you're drawing parallels. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I get
and
you.
when that happens, then kind of like you've got blinkers on because you kind of thinking, well, we here comes the government proclaiming that they have the potential to save us out of whatever economic uh,
Mm.
uh, quagmire we're in, whatever. I mean, the white problem, the poor white problem was a massive thing during the 30s, especially with the onset of the Great Depression, and then the
Yeah.
failure of gold in the 30s. And Smuts was trying was putting in his own policies to try and combat that, but the Nats kind of tapped in on the pulse of Afrikaner nationalism or pride
Mm.
by looking at the root of the problem. And the root of the problem they saw was the upliftment of the poor whites. Or the root of the problem
Mm.
was the poor whites, not to say
Yeah.
the black or colored problem. The black or colored problem, I think, was a consequence of the poor white problem. In order to try
Mm.
and uplift the poor whites, we needed to separate the black and the colored people from the whites. And as a
Mm.
result, that led to apartheid. This kind of
Mm.
misconceptional or ill-placed um, idea that if we
Mm.
separate the races, then we'll help the one race, and
Yeah.
and that race is the one of favor. And
Yeah.
Afrikaners were buying into it because why not? It was like,
Yeah.
okay, these guys are our saviors. DF Malan, hierdie manne gaan ons red, and all of that. Whereas the English people and the Jews, I mean, they had their own political ideas of what the South African diaspora should look like, and their own racial hierarchy that they were looking at too. But they themselves, and as a result, were looking at apartheid and the National Party's plans from
Mm.
a very different lens, and so
Mm.
they kind of like positioned themselves more on the periphery of what was going on with the Afrikaner nationalists, because they were saying
Yeah.
this is not really, I mean, to actually legislate segregation on a massive level, and not just segregate not just segregation, but petty segregation. I mean, not being able to use
Yeah.
taps, not being able to use bus stops, just to prove
Yeah.
the point of white supremacist power. I mean, that kind
Yeah.
of like, I think, pushed a lot of white liberals, and even some moderates also to the side of, well, this is not what we really signed up for.
Mm. No, I get you, and I like how you draw those parallels because they help me understand both sides of the story better.
Mm,
That's what I was saying. I could realize, but we have similarities because we're made to think us and you are two different people.
right,
But the
right.
more I
Mm,
live vicariously through your experiences, the more I realize, no, hang on, we are one people. You might not want to see it that way, and that's fine, but you suffered, I suffered.
Yeah.
And I understand why you want to protect everything that you have right now. And I understand the fear that you have, how it came about. I understand the engineering of your anxiety of Black people
Mm.
or fear, whatever that is. And it intensified, or should I say, being born in Hoopstad I was introduced to that unconsciously because I could see it happening my whole
Yeah.
life. I could see it through my mother, I could see it through my mother's mother, my grandmother, and I could see it through public psychology of Hoopstad,
Right.
especially,
Yeah.
especially in the township, even in town, that these are two different worlds altogether. But what is it that can connect both worlds together? And how when are you going to have a conversation? Because we need to talk. We cannot continue to live in two different worlds in such a very small town. So going to UFS, and again, this is why I keep saying history followed me. History is a calling to me. I met this Afrikaner historian. Well, he's late now, but Dr. Jan Anstemmet. Man, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be so open-minded about both Africana historiography and Black nationalist historiography
Right.
because he he made me enjoy history so much that you could, especially Africana history, because that's what the UFS uh, specializes in,
Mm.
National Party history. Even the archives is mostly National Party presidents, Free State presidents, your C.R. Swart, your M.T. Steyn, all the way to P.W. Boet,
Yeah.
Didrex, I forgot his name. So all of those, all of those, and presidents, yeah, I said M.T. Steyn, President Steyn.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. He was
Yeah, Bram
the OG.
Fischer. Yeah. Bram, not the ANC Bram Fischer, other Bram
The
Fischer.
other brown fisher.
Yeah, so now he was teaching Africana nationalist history, and he used a lot of humor.
Mm.
He humanized your Verwoerd, your Buota,
Yeah.
and all of these names. And I mean, I think he loves saying, "Oh, H.F. Verwoerd. Do you know what is the main name of H.F. Verwoerd?" And then you're like French is like, "Oh, can you imagine him one day hitting up on the lady and say, 'Hi, my name is Hendrik French Verwoerd.'
Mm.
That's not my name, but that's how I kiss."
Oh. 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 Oh.
Man, classic. Do you get
Oh.
it? Do you
Don't
see
you?
what I mean?
Right.
So he somehow, as ignorant as he was, he used his ignorance to make black students see the beauty of understanding South African history for what it is.
Yeah.
Whether it's apartheid history, whether it's a painful history, whether it's a history of segregation, separate development, whatever you want to call it. But he made you see that Dr. Verwoerd was a human being.
Mm.
He made you see that you can tap into the life of Louis Botha, Paul Kruger, and try to understand what kind of person they were,
Mm.
and and try to look for pockets of spaces that connects both. And when I started doing my PhD, sorry, I could see how Black nationalist historiography speaks to
Mm.
Afrikaner nationalist historiography. I mean, Louis Botha, he becomes the first president of Union of South Africa in 1910. He meets with the ANC guys in 1913
Mm.
after the Land Act was passed. So I'm not preaching the Rainbow Nation politics here.
Mm.
I'm not saying this. We're not saying this for likes or for comments or to be controversial, but we're just trying to show people out there that we haven't had a conversation.
exactly.
as South Africans. And some of us are willing to enter the conversation knowing and understanding why certain things happened the way they had to happen, the way they needed to happen. You see.
Taps, you,
And I had, yes,
yeah, yeah, go for it, go for it. Go
okay,
on.
so and I had many anecdotes that continue to make me realize that hang on, we are all people here.
Yeah.
For example, I've made an example about those two white girls. Another one was, and this lady happens to be a good friend of mine today, and I never thought we could be friends. So what happened was she was running for GA in the elections, SRC elections. And at UFS, when you run for any office as a student, you go through all the races. So every race had its own constituency, and you have to convince all the constituencies about why should they vote for you and things like that. So one day she went to this other race, and I was sitting there listening to how she was speaking, and they were very hard on her. Those Afrikaner Macy
Mm.
went hard on her. She's English and she's from KZN, if I remember correctly. And I was like, wait, but you're all white. Why are you ganging up on each other? Because the perception was it's us and them.
Yeah,
And you cannot separate which one is British, which one is English, which one is Afrikaner. We all, and some of them, in fact, almost everyone speaks Afrikaans.
yeah.
Only when you get to read and understand and have a conversation, and you're like, oh, okay, so you're actually English. And what was interesting, she didn't speak in Afrikaans, but she's from KZN, she doesn't know much Afrikaans. She can speak basic, but to debate, to write, to be articulate, she needed to use English. And they never liked that about her. They never thought she was gonna make it as a DA candidate because she's not Afrikaner. She's English. So it reminded them of what the British and Afrikaner, the
Um,
history between the two, between the two groups, you see. So so then later on I bumped into her on campus and I asked her, what is going on? I was so curious to understand what is the matter? Why were they so harsh on you? They're like, no, no, it's politics. They're politicking. It's just the
sure.
way it is. So what
So
I'm trying to say is,
she accepted it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There was nothing she could do. But she was so emotional. She almost shed a tear because
Shame.
they were like, so the
Mm.
long and short of it is that through being an outsider, I could see, I was starting to see things that it's like the universe was showing me things that I needed to question
Mm.
about my place, about the Laager effect, whether I'm in, I'm outside, whether uh, I'm going to be treated like a child, like my forefathers, whatever the case might be. But whenever I'm in Hoopstad, every time when I'm home, I always look around. I'm like, but this town is so small. But I've never traveled. I've never walked all of the town.
Mm.
I still walk. I still walk where I stay in the township. And in town, can't say the CBD because it doesn't really have a CBD. There's one long road, one long street. It's not even a road. So you see yourself in two different classes all at the same time. And but the beauty of that for me has been understanding and realizing that we need to talk, we need to have a
Yeah,
conversation
yeah.
so we understand each other better, so that there isn't any hostilities. Because to this day, there's still those hostilities. I'm like, ah, apartheid messed everyone up.
Yeah. Taps,
Because,
yeah.
yeah,
Let me just interject here quickly because we are running out of time again. That I can just close this little session off here by saying that that conversation is really so necessary, and it's something that you and I have spoken about, and it's actually one of the reasons why you and I decided to start a podcast like this, is so that we
yeah,
can have frank conversations about, and Frank is not just a guy who's walking around. This is a conversation that needs to take place because, you know, you're right. There are a lot of I kind of mingle like on the periphery of both circles, and I mean I'm not gonna sound like that, you know, the white guy that's always no, but I've got black friends too. I've got black friends as well. You know,
Yeah.
the fact is that, you know, there are these circles that need to be reconciled because, as you said, there are these misperceptions that
Yeah.
have been put in place. And like you're saying, you know, the so-called historical figures that have come through, the Afrikaner figures like Verwoerd, your professor was talking about with the humorous side, that kind of humanization is crucial, not just in historical circles, but also in public circles, so that young kids can understand. I mean, you can't just, like Lorata was talking about, Oranje being this boogeyman for, you know, for black communities. That a guy like Verwoerd was actually put in place as a stalwart of apartheid by apartheid supporters. But that position is actually, in a way, and very pervertly being perpetuated by black nationalists as well. To put forward the idea of, you know, here's the boogeyman, HF Verwoerd. This is, I mean, we know who we know what his policies were. We know how despicable those policies were. But let's understand the man. Let's understand this guy. If we say, bugger off, footsack, man, we don't want to understand this guy, then you close the door for any sort of building. And I mean,
Yeah.
don't we want a country where we can just be like, hey guys, let's just
Yeah.
let's fight for the future, yeah, because it's
Yeah.
serious.
Yeah.
This is the time for us,
Yeah.
make or break. I mean, economic hardship is still going strong in the platteland and in the townships of South Africa. But like, isn't it time? I mean, this should have happened 30 years ago, that there are conversations being had between
Yeah.
the white middle class, between the black emerging middle class, and, you know, the poverty stricken areas. But we never really
Yeah.
got to that point because it was just a thing of convenience. Well, I mean, let's just have our social apartheid still continue, you know,
Yeah.
into the 20th century. Let's not have these conversations because we're not ready for it yet. But
Yeah.
we have
You
to
guys,
be.
you guys are pulling the race card again. You guys are
Yeah,
pulling that race
exactly.
card again.
Yeah, now you're putting that ice card again.
No. Oh, it's
It
with pride. That's all we want. We just want to talk. We need to
just got.
talk. Because if
We
we
have to.
don't, yeah, because if we don't, we keep on fearing each other.
Exactly.